My name is Maris Lowell, I'm 31 years old, a marketing manager living in Brooklyn, New York. And until that night at Madison Square Garden, I thought I had my future figured out. Darian Holt and I had been together for 5 years, meeting during our final semester at NYU. We had the kind of relationship people envied, at least from the outside. We shared an apartment in Williamsburg. Had Sunday routines of farmers' markets and lazy brunches. And every December we flew to Vermont for skiing. My friends used to tease me about when he'd finally put a ring on it, and honestly, I thought it would be soon. He'd been more affectionate lately, more thoughtful. He even surprised me with tickets to the Knicks game. Knowing how much I loved the electric energy of the stadium. That night, I wore my vintage Ewing jersey, my hair in loose curls. Thinking we'd have a couple beers, shout ourselves hoarse. And maybe end the night with him whispering something about our future. We got to our seats early, row 12, perfect view of the court. There was a woman 2 seats down from me, tall, brunette. Wearing a fitted leather jacket and bright red lipstick. She glanced over once, smiled politely, then turned back to her phone. I didn't think twice. The game started, the crowd roared. And Darian seemed a little distracted, but I chalked it up to him being focused on the play. Midway through the second quarter, the arena's lights dimmed slightly during a timeout. And the giant screen overhead flashed, "Kiss Cam." People laughed, couples kissed awkwardly, some over the top. Darian shifted in his seat, and for a moment, I thought maybe we'd be on it. But then the camera panned, zoomed, and suddenly, it was him. On the screen. But not with me. He had already moved 2 seats over, kneeling in front of the brunette. My brain froze. The crowd erupted in cheers as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. She gasped, covering her mouth, then nodded. And they kissed like they'd been waiting forever for that moment. My ears rang. The man I had shared a bed with that morning was proposing to another woman in front of 20,000 people, and the whole thing was being broadcast live inside the arena. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. People around me were clapping, whistling. A stranger beside me nudged my arm, smiling, as if I should be happy for them. I sat there, my hands gripping my knees, my vision tunneling. Darian didn't even look my way. When the camera cut back to the court, he slid back into his original seat like nothing happened, his breath quick. His hands shaking slightly. "Maris," he started, but I stood up before he could finish. I walked up the steps, every cheer from the crowd feeling like a dagger in my back. My phone buzzed in my pocket, 3 messages from him, one from my best friend Sable Quinn. What the hell just happened? I'm watching the game on TV. By the time I reached the exit, the cold February air hit my face. And I realized I had left my scarf and my half-finished beer behind. None of it mattered. In that moment, I wasn't Maris the girlfriend anymore. I was Maris who just watched her life crumble on a jumbotron. When I stepped out into the icy February night, the noise of the stadium still roared behind me, muffled by the heavy metal doors. But it was like my body refused to let me go back inside. I stood there for a moment, staring at the steam rising from a street vendor's cart. The smell of hot pretzels and roasted peanuts mixing with the metallic taste of adrenaline in my mouth. My phone buzzed again, Darian's name lighting up the screen, but I swiped it away. Without opening, my fingers were trembling too much to type even if I wanted to. The sidewalk was crowded with latecomers heading into the game, brushing past me, their laughter stabbing at my ears. I started walking without a plan, my boots clicking on the wet pavement. each step pulling me further from the place where my life had just detonated in public view. A yellow cab slowed beside me, the driver leaning out to ask if I needed a ride. But I shook my head. I didn't want to be confined. Didn't want to be trapped in a small space where my thoughts could press in and crush me. As I reached 8th Avenue, I heard my name, loud, urgent, Maris. Wait. I turned and saw Sable Quinn, my best friend since freshman year, weaving through the crowd toward me. She must have taken the subway straight from Queens the second she saw the broadcast. Her coat was half-zipped, hair windblown, eyes wide with fury and worry. "Tell me that didn't just happen," she said, breathless. I couldn't answer. My throat felt like it had closed entirely. Sable wrapped her arms around me, and for the first time since the kiss cam moment, my knees threatened to give out. "Okay," she said, pulling back, "we're not doing this here. Let's go." She hailed a cab and practically shoved me inside before climbing in after me. As the car pulled into traffic, the reality began to seep in, not in one dramatic wave, but in small, sharp pricks. The way Darian had been working late more often. The time I found an unfamiliar gold bracelet in our bathroom drawer and he'd said it belonged to his cousin. The sudden interest in going to Knicks games when he'd always preferred watching at home. Every piece slid into place now, forming a picture I hadn't wanted to see. "Who is she?" Sable asked softly, almost like she was afraid of the answer. I shook my head. "I don't know. I've never seen her before tonight." Sable's jaw tightened. "Well, she knows you exist. You were right there. And God, Maris, he proposed to her like you were nothing." The word nothing lodged in my chest like glass. I turned toward the window, watching the blur of neon signs and wet asphalt. My phone buzzed again. Another from Darian. "We need to talk. Please." It's not what it looked like. The absurdity of that message almost made me laugh. Except my face didn't seem to remember how. We ended up back at my apartment. Sable insisted on staying the night, saying she wouldn't leave me alone with that snake roaming free in Manhattan. I collapsed on the couch while she made tea. The kind she always brewed when one of us had a breakup, though this wasn't just a breakup. This was a public execution of my relationship. My laptop sat open on the coffee table from earlier that morning, when I'd been sending out client proposals. The temptation to Google Knicks kiss cam proposal was strong. But I knew the video would already be online, racking up views, shared on every sports blog and social feed. I didn't need to watch it again, it was burned into my mind in perfect clarity. Sable handed me the mug and sat cross-legged beside me. "You know he's going to try to spin this," she said. "He's going to have some insane excuse." I nodded slowly. "And I don't think I want to hear it." But deep down, I knew I would, because the only thing worse than hearing the lie was never knowing just how long he'd been building it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly on the coffee table. Sunlight spilling across the floor in harsh stripes. Sable was still asleep in the armchair, wrapped in a blanket, her hair a messy halo. My stomach churned when I saw the notifications: 12 missed calls from Darian, 5 texts, and a voicemail. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity clawed at me. I put the phone to my ear, his voice low and strained. "Maris, please, I need you to let me explain. It's not what you think. I'm coming over." I froze. Coming over? My building had a doorman. He wouldn't just let Darian in after the scene last night, at least I hope not. I slipped into the bedroom, shut the door, and called down to the front desk. If Darian Holt shows up, don't let him upstairs, I said, my voice sharper than intended. The doorman hesitated, then promised. By the time I came back to the living room, Sable was awake, sipping tea like she'd been waiting for me to fill her in. So? She asked. He left a voicemail. Said he wants to explain. She raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, it was a misunderstanding? Maybe the other woman was just auditioning for a play called Public Betrayal? Her sarcasm was a lifeline, but my chest still ached. By noon, the internet had done what it does best. A coworker texted me a link to Barstool Sports with the headline, Kiss Cam Marriage Proposal Stuns Crowd at Knicks Game. The video autoplayed, showing Darian kneeling, the brunette gasping, the crowd roaring. In the background, for a brief, humiliating second, you could see me, mouth slightly open, hands gripping my knees, eyes wide. I slammed the laptop shut. Around 3 p.m. Darian's email arrived. The subject line read, Please read before you hate me forever. Against my better judgment, I opened it. He claimed the proposal was a publicity stunt for a new sportswear brand he'd been consulting for. The woman, he wrote, was part of the campaign, and it was supposed to be harmless. Theater. Harmless. As if proposing to someone else in front of me, without warning, was harmless. He said he hadn't told me because he didn't want to ruin the surprise, and that he had planned to explain right after and then propose to me for real in a private, meaningful way. My fingers tightened on the keyboard. Even if this was true, it was absurd, reckless, cruel. But then came the line that stopped me cold. The truth is, I've been seeing her for a while. It started before the campaign. I didn't mean for it to go this far. My breath caught. He had written it like an afterthought, buried between excuses. I read the sentence over and over until the words blurred. Sable, reading over my shoulder, let out a low whistle. So the publicity stunt was real, but so was the affair. I nodded numbly. He had essentially confirmed my worst fear, worse, actually. Because it meant that the kiss cam moment wasn't just betrayal. It was him choosing her over me in front of an audience. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment of our relationship, looking for the exact second it had all shifted. But the truth was, it hadn't been 1 second. It had been a slow leak, an erosion, and I'd been too in love to notice. 2 days passed without me answering Darian's calls. But that didn't stop him from trying. Morning, noon, midnight. Sable had basically moved in, claiming she was on Maris' watch until further notice. I was grateful. The silence of my apartment without her would have swallowed me whole. On the third evening, while she was out grabbing Thai takeout, I decided to finally clean the pile of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. That's when I saw it, an unmarked padded envelope addressed to Darian, postmarked from Austin, Texas. I shouldn't have, but I opened it. Inside was a glossy brochure for a boutique sportswear brand I'd never heard of, along with a contract bearing Darian's name, and hers. The brunette from the game. Her name was Celine Maris, yes, Maris like mine, which made my stomach turn. She was listed as brand ambassador, and the contract showed an advance payment of $25,000, already deposited into a joint bank account with both their names. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't just about him cheating, he was financially entangled with her. And worse, the dates on the contract went back almost 14 months, meaning their partnership had started well before any so-called publicity stunt. I pulled out my laptop, heart racing, and searched Celine Maris. Her Instagram was public. Endless photos of her courtside at games, yacht parties in Miami. And, my breath caught, selfies taken inside my apartment, my kitchen, my balcony. In one, she was wearing my sweatshirt. The captions were cryptic but pointed. When he chooses you, it shows. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the laptop. Sable returned just then, setting the food down and instantly reading my face. What happened? I turned the screen toward her. She leaned in, eyes narrowing. Oh, my God. She's been in your home. I nodded, my throat tight. And look at this, I said, sliding the contract over. Sable scanned it, then looked up. This isn't just cheating, Maris. This is premeditated. They've been building a life together, money, business, everything, while you were still in it. Something inside me shifted then, a click I could almost hear. The grief and humiliation were still there. But they were being crowded out by something hotter, sharper, rage. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that plans. I opened a new email draft and began typing to Darian, keeping my tone icy and businesslike. I've reviewed the contract and your shared bank account with Celine Maris. We'll be discussing this with an attorney. Do not contact me again unless it's through legal counsel. I hit send before I could second guess it. Sable's mouth curved into a grim smile. That's my girl. But even as I tried to steady my breathing, one thought lodged itself in my mind and refused to leave. If they'd been together that long, then the kiss cam proposal hadn't been some random, cruel coincidence. They had wanted me to see it. They had wanted to humiliate me. The morning after I sent that email, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since the night at the stadium. My grief had been replaced by a cold, methodical focus. If Darian and Celine had wanted to humiliate me in public, then I would dismantle them in a way that left no doubt who they had underestimated. I started by pulling up our shared Dropbox account. Darian had set it up years ago to store receipts and travel documents. He had forgotten that I still had full access. The folders were a mess, but buried under Q4 brand assets, I found a subfolder labeled simply Personal. Inside were scans of contracts, bank transfers, and, shockingly, photos of Celine in various high-end hotels. Receipts for dinners that cost more than my monthly rent. And airline tickets showing trips that perfectly coincided with the weekends he'd told me he was visiting his father in Boston. One PDF caught my eye, a wire transfer receipt for $60,000 to an account in the Cayman Islands. Dated just 3 weeks before the kiss cam incident. The sender? The same boutique sportswear brand. My marketing brain went into overdrive. The brand was new, barely a year old, yet they were moving large sums offshore? That wasn't sponsorship money. That was laundering. My fingers hovered over my phone. If I brought this to the right people, it wouldn't just ruin Darian's reputation, it could get him indicted. Still, I didn't want to act impulsively. I needed corroboration. I called an old college friend, Theo, who now worked in financial compliance. Hypothetically, I began, if someone was funneling sponsor money through offshore accounts. He didn't let me finish. Hypothetically, that's a felony. And if you can prove intent, it's prison time. When I told him I had receipts, literal receipts, his tone sharpened. Maris, do not confront them. Not yet. Let me look at this. If you're right, you're sitting on evidence federal investigators would love. By the time Sable came home that evening, I had printed everything and tucked it into a manila envelope. She eyed it like it was radioactive. This is your revenge, isn't it? She said. I didn't answer directly. Let's just say, if Darian thought the worst I could do was cry and block his number, he's about to learn otherwise. I felt the heat of my anger settle into something steadier, something almost calm. I wasn't going to scream at him, or show up at his door, or post a dramatic story online. I was going to let the truth be the wrecking ball, and when it hit, it would be inescapable. What neither Sable nor Theo knew, though, was the thought I kept locked in the back of my mind. I still didn't know the full extent of Celine's involvement. And I had a hunch that uncovering it would hurt even more than the proposal itself. Theo's investigation moved faster than I expected. By midweek, he'd confirmed what I suspected. The boutique sportswear brand was a shell company, funneling investor money through offshore accounts, with Darian listed as a strategic consultant and Celine as the public face. It wasn't just laundering, there were fraudulent invoices, fake sponsorship deals, even falsified charity partnerships. Theo said federal authorities would salivate over this case. But it was something else he found that made my stomach twist. Maris, he said over the phone, Celine isn't just some influencer Darian fell for. She has a criminal record, identity theft, wire fraud. Served 18 months in Texas. And guess what name she used back then? My grip on the phone tightened. What? Celine Holt. My pulse kicked up. She had already been using Darian's last name years before she even met me, if she met me by chance at all. I pulled up her Instagram again, combing through the oldest posts. That's when I noticed something I'd overlooked, a photo from 2 years ago. Long before I'd ever heard of her, taken at a charity gala in Austin. In the background, blurred but unmistakable, was Darian, standing at the bar, laughing with her. My heart sank. He hadn't fallen for her during the brand campaign, he'd known her for years. Sable was sitting across from me on the couch when I made the discovery. Scrolling through her phone, I turned the laptop toward her. She froze mid-scroll. You're telling me she's been in his orbit this whole time? I nodded slowly. And probably mine, too. I just didn't see it. A memory surfaced, unbidden, last summer. Darian convincing me to skip my usual 4th of July weekend in Cape Cod with my family so we could have a quiet weekend together. He'd booked us a last-minute trip to Miami. One night, he left the hotel early, saying he was feeling sick. I'd stayed at the rooftop bar alone, watching fireworks over the water. Now, in hindsight, I realized it had been the same weekend Celine posted from a yacht in Miami. Wearing a dress I remembered Darian complimenting once in a boutique window. The betrayal was layered, almost artistic in its cruelty. But there was one more detail I couldn't shake, her last name. She'd gone from Holt to Maris. That wasn't just coincidence. She'd taken my name, my unusual, hard-to-Google name, and attached it to herself publicly. I didn't know if it was some twisted taunt or a way to blend her identity with mine for business purposes, but either way, it felt like theft on a deeper level. Theo wanted to turn everything over to the authorities immediately. But I asked him for one more week. Why? He pressed. Because, I said, they didn't mind making me watch when they thought they were winning. Now I want them to see me when they lose. I didn't tell him the other reason I needed more time. I had an idea that would ruin them not just legally, but socially, and it would start with the same platform they used to humiliate me, a crowd, a camera, and a moment they'd never expect. The plan came together almost too perfectly, as if the universe had been keeping it in its back pocket just for me. A week after Theo confirmed the full scope of Darian and Celine's scheme, Sable sent me a link. The boutique sportswear brand was hosting a massive launch event at Madison Square Garden, yes. The same place they'd staged my public humiliation. It was invite only, with influencers, investors, and press expected to attend. And thanks to Sable's friend in event production, I knew they planned to livestream the whole thing. I didn't need an invitation. I still had my media credentials from work, which could get me in as press. Theo helped me prepare a package, copies of every document, every receipt, every wire transfer. All neatly organized in a single flash drive. But I also added something of my own, a compilation video I'd edited late into the night, splicing together their kiss cam proposal with the receipts of their crimes. Intercut with photos of Celine in my apartment. All set to the kind of upbeat pop music they love to use in their ads. The night of the event, I dressed deliberately, sleek black suit, hair pinned back. A press badge hanging from my neck. I slipped into the arena without a hitch, blending into the crowd of photographers and reporters. From my vantage point near the media table, I watched Darian and Celine take the stage. He was in a tailored navy suit, she in a white silk jumpsuit that looked like a parody of a wedding outfit. They smiled like royalty, basking in the flash of cameras. Darian started his speech, talking about authenticity and community, the words sounding hollow even through the microphone. When it was Celine's turn, she launched into the brand's journey, her voice smooth, her smile polished. That was my cue. I slipped behind the AV booth, where two tech guys were managing the livestream feed. "Hi," I said, flashing my badge, "I have an updated media package from corporate. Needs to go live now." One of them hesitated, but I kept my voice steady. "It's been approved by the PR head, time sensitive." The flash drive slid into the laptop before they could question me further. And then it happened. The giant screens above the stage flickered, the live stream feed cutting to black for half a second before my video began to play. At first, the crowd laughed, thinking it was part of the show, the kiss cam clip. Darian kneeling, Celine gasping. But then came the receipts, the contracts, the Cayman Island transfers, her mugshot from Texas. The laughter curdled into murmurs, then gasps. Celine's smile collapsed. Darian stepped forward, shouting something off mic. But his voice was drowned out by the footage of them in my apartment. Timestamps matching the dates of his business trips. Security rushed toward the AV booth, but it was too late. The video had already looped twice. Reporters were on their phones, cameras flashing. Investors pulling away from the stage like it was radioactive. I slipped out in the chaos, my pulse calm, my steps measured. Outside, the February air felt different this time, crisp, almost clean. I knew Theo would handle the rest. Federal authorities would get the evidence within the hour. And whatever happened to them next would happen fast. Back at my apartment, Sable was waiting with champagne. She didn't ask for details. The expression on my face must have told her everything. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders drop. The weight lifting. I wasn't naive enough to think the scars would fade overnight. But I knew one thing with certainty: they had made me watch when they thought they'd won. Tonight, I had returned the favor, and I hadn't just watched. I had ended it. The lesson, I realized as I sipped the champagne, wasn't just about betrayal. It was about reclaiming the narrative. And that, I thought, was the kind of victory no camera could ever fully capture.